Everybody, welcome to Rimshot, the Drummers Podcast, episode 2. And we have a really good one lined up today. We're going to talk about drum set and percussion on various tracks. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to somebody I've known for a very long time. He plays a lot of different things, and we're going to showcase a couple of tracks of things that he has done. Without further ado, I welcome Chris Howard to the podcast. Hello, Chris.
Oh, hey, Rob. Thank you very much. Glad to be with you.
Cool. I'm glad to have you on. We have a lot of good things to discuss. We did some discussion on the pre-taping of this episode, and we're going to bring in 2 songs from SoundCloud. So, and the link to Chris's SoundCloud will be right below as all these episodes. We're going to include all the links to all the projects that everybody comes on and does in the description. So they'll be there for you to check out. And on the SoundCloud page, there's 40 tracks that you can listen to, various styles. And like I mentioned earlier on, we're going to focus on just 2 tracks. And the first track I want to bring in and have some questions about is Influential Friends is the name of the song. And it's by an artist named Merav. Is that the right pronunciation?
Correct, yeah.
Yes. So on this track, it features the cajon and the drum set in this case. And the second track we'll talk about later, it features a few more percussion items and drum set. So what I want to ask you first, Chris, is how were you approached? What was the approach to this project? How did you come to know about the project in terms of recording? Because this is really a recording project. So what was the means and ways that it happened?
I first, well, it came about through making a connection, just responding to a classified ad, actually, that the group was looking for hand percussion. Specifically, they addressed that. And so that was my initial connection.
Very cool. Yeah, that's definitely great. And I think it's a lot of, I should probably say that, in terms of getting involved in projects, can be, I guess it can be tricky because there's so many different projects out there that are looking for personnel. And, how do you go about doing that? And how does, a sort of a drummer or slash percussionist like yourself, how, the story behind how that all kind of comes about is interesting for each player and how you come to know different artists. I think that, putting out the information, whether it's a classified ad or through the website, if each drummer has a website, you do it in different ways. So it's interesting how that kind of pans out, in terms of popularity. What are the popular ways or the more well-known ways of getting your sort of your music out there where people can kind of check you out? So you had the benefit of actually having a few other projects kind of on your SoundCloud. So was the SoundCloud also part of that connection in terms of the classified ads, or how was that utilized?
Yeah, I guess provides an audio resume, if you will, where you can direct people, send them links to your work. And so I guess that's, I found it useful in that capacity.
Yeah, it's great. It's something that I think having it out there that way really gives people who are looking for what you do a good opportunity to see, or in this case here, because it's SoundCloud. So, and then apart from going to see you perform live, were there any instances of like people seeing you perform live and then approaching you and say, hey, I really enjoyed what you did on these tracks for this particular artist, would you be interested in perhaps maybe, doing some recording? So is anything like that part of the scheme as well in terms of people reaching out?
Yeah, that happens from time to time as well.
Yeah, that's something too that it's easier. I think the connections are easier when people get to see you play. I saw you play years ago because we were in the same classes in college. So I didn't really get to hear how you played till I actually got to see you play. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is good. I think it was a Van Halen tribute of all things, which is really pretty amazing. Just thinking back, like, when did I first, discover your playing? And I think it was that. And of course, all the stuff that happens in college when you play with, like, say, the jazz ensemble or something of that nature, which, really gave me sort of an idea like, oh, this is pretty amazing stuff. So there's a history even of just myself seeing you play with different things, and then to have, this recording lineage of things that you have done is pretty amazing. And again, I encourage all you guys to go to Chris's SoundCloud and check out what's going on there, because there's a lot of different styles represented. So for this track, Influential Friends by Meirav, like I mentioned earlier, it's cajon and drums. So going into a studio session, because was a session type of situation, and there's a certain amount of preparation that goes into walking into a studio and doing the deal, with the artist you play with. So in terms of preparation, I want to ask you, what were the thoughts like towards the music, and both in studio and if it led to a live performance, what were the thought processes behind that?
Well, with that track in particular, I don't remember if I was provided a rough demo recording. Sometimes those are made available to me in advance. It could be, several weeks in advance, and it could even, quite honestly, be led up to the night before the session. Sometimes I'll get some emails, oh, here's the track for tomorrow. Um, so I don't remember if that particular track, if I did have any reference point for it. Um, but I think the overall idea was to kind of have the track, uh, build in intensity. Um, and I guess we made the decision to, um, start it with just some gentle cajon accompaniment. Um, and I think I also just wanted to explore some other sound possibilities using the instruments. So I did have some broomcorn brushes, which I think sounded appropriate for that mood, I guess, where you can just offer some gentle accompaniment. And ultimately, they wound up using um, the entire track. So there's cajon that goes the length of the track.
Oh, okay.
Initially, I believe that I just did the single pass, play it all the way through, and it's again one of those things I don't remember specifically if then it was suggested, because sometimes that does happen where um, I'll play the track. Sometimes I'm thinking, okay, that's it. That's all that the song needed. Um, and then there might be a little gentle knock on the door, and somebody pokes their head in, and they'll say, "Oh, how about some drum set?" And so I guess just in the spirit of trying to deliver what people are asking of you, um, I would do. I guess then you have to then think about, I guess, the overall architecture. Then where are the entrance points? Are there any exit points for, in this case, for the drum set? Um, and of course, those are some of the details that we would talk about. And some of the things are pretty obvious in terms of other contributions as well. So I believe on that track there's also a Rhodes played by good friend Hunter Gibson.
Oh,
And so, he may have some ideas. Um, and he may then do his track, and then that'll help guide me along where, okay, well, he entered at this point in the song. That's a great point for the drums to enter.
yep.
So, the actual instrumentation and the what's what I'm looking for. Um, well, the arrangements are actually all generally made there during the session itself.
Okay.
We kind of always learn certain things about it where maybe what you thought was a good place to enter turns out maybe it wasn't.
Mhm.
So, it's just those kind of game day decisions that you make in the studio.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you have a certain amount of preparation, but then the ability to be flexible depending on aspects of the studio, especially the way certain things sound and how they connect, like you were mentioning, like the where you can enter and where you can exit. That's something where you can plan only so much because once you're in the room and you're recording, it's like things have to flex accordingly, I guess, because you may not initially hear a certain idea that you want to utilize because it may cause a conflict with something else where you want to come in and where you want to get out. So that's interesting that you bring that up because preparation is important, but when you're going into a working situation, it only goes as far as it can go. And I guess I shouldn't say very rarely, but things coming together, you know, in one pass or one, setting or one moment is like kind of on the rare, So it's like
Mm.
having that ability to be flexible, I think is an important thing, to like you mentioned, like, okay, well, I had a certain thing, but you know, that can very well change.
Yeah, there's always moving parts.
Yeah.
And also and this has happened as well, not with that particular track, but with the Homeport Meirav project where the group leader, Porter Smith, he composes all the material. He'll make decisions right there on the spot, um, offering up completely different solutions than how it was initially presented. So he might have an idea. We're just going to do this whole section here a cappella now. No supporting instruments. So now, of course, you've gone in to the session thinking, I'm just going to knock this out, going to play it. And then all of a sudden, nope, it's not going that way anymore. And and again, so you do need that flexibility to hear um, different possibilities, um, arrangement wise, instrumentation wise, sound wise. Um, so it's a dynamic situation, you know.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Homeport because that's the next tune that I want to not talk about them right now, but the tune is called New Dreamland and it has a lot more on it. But before we started recording, me and Chris were talking about these two songs, and I had no idea that these two projects were connected. And you had mentioned, oh, did you check out the personnel? It's like I was more focused on the drums than the actual people on the track, which is, to be fair, I don't want to be forget those guys. But the whole thing for me was trying to pick out these drumming features, for this episode. And I had no clue they were both connected together. So I will definitely, of course, include that below as well, in terms of a link where you can go check out what has been discussed in terms of the projects and the personnel. So there'll be some stuff there. But it's just too funny because I just randomly picked these tunes in a way where I went through the catalog and didn't know that there was a connection with the project. So it's kind of interesting. And I guess that's the thing too, in terms of the preparation that you've done for influential friends, that led you into New Dreamland, and so I'm sure when we talk about that song, there's a whole other preparation because there's a lot more on that track to talk about. But back to Influential Friends, the instrumentation you already covered the using the corn is corn sticks you mentioned, right? Or am I getting that proper? The sticks you
The
use.
broomcorn
Oh,
brushes.
broomcorn. So
Hmm.
that's if for those who aren't familiar, like myself. So what is the material used for those sticks? Is it actually corn? Is it the corn itself? Is it the covering of the corn, or how does that work out?
It's more of like the, I guess, tall grass,
Okay.
if you can envision that, and that I guess it must be then dried somehow. And this particular model of brushes, they're pretty long actually, and completely handmade. By my friends at Haydenville Broomworks,
Mm.
and all handcrafted, beautifully crafted. And so yeah, essentially, if you can imagine, it's kind of like a giant wad of grass. So it provides a really subtle, um, a very subtle sound. And of course, on the cajon, um, it's it's an alternative to playing with just the bare hands, and also it's an alternative to perhaps like a shaker
Mm.
sound. It's probably on par with a shaker, um, but it has a different quality,
Mm.
so it does provide a nice alternative, especially if you don't want a shaker. Maybe you want something that has something with a little different character. Um, so ultimately, I thought that that was a good choice, and um, I guess it was agreed upon. Yes, that was great. They enjoyed um, that little contribution.
Yeah. So like in terms of the preparation to come in on that particular track, you kind of had that sort of sound in mind for the track before going in, and was that like a game day decision as well, or?
uh, I think actually we probably just made that decision right there.
Oh, okay.
Um, I did bring, um, a truckload of instruments. So, and I think that that may have been actually one of the first sessions where I knew that it was going to be a mix of drum set and hand percussion. So I had to be a little selective, but I just remember the truck was packed, and I would make sure that I would bring some extras, like the broomcorn brushes, just in case, just to have them there.
Right.
And so um, so at least I knew that much. So I was able to prepare for that.
Yeah. That's great. That's amazing. And I'll include a picture of the broom brushes on this as well. You get to see what they look like. So because I'm not really familiar with them, so it'd be cool to share that with everybody.
Sure.
And I guess we already covered the instrumentation and how you decided on, basically what you were going to use, for both tracks. So I guess we can go right into the next track that I want to bring up today and ask you about is the group called Homeport, which is the related project to Mayrav. And the song is called New Dreamland, and it's got a lot of stuff on it. So I'm going to read off the instrumentation of the song, what's been used on it. So we have bongos, we have claves, guichero, timbale, and drum set. So there's a good, like a smorgasbord of instrumentation on this guy. So I guess the same things apply in terms of the questioning. So we can kind of slightly backtrack and talk about what we were talked about how your approach. So now these two projects are interrelated, which is great. So we want to cover that aspect of it. But preparation for this tune. So was it something that you heard the track, you heard the demo, and you're like, okay, these items might be great to incorporate. And you mentioned, sort of game day decisions. So was it a situation similar to that where you had an idea going in what you want to use, and you brought your instrumentation and you recovered, you had your truck packed with all the items? So I'm assuming that with Mayrov and Homeport, these are two separate sessions. They weren't on the same date.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. The home port session I think was that was right on the tail end of the COVID lockdown. Um, there was discussion about when a session might potentially take place, but of course everything was shut down. And um, if I'm not mistaken, I think the official notice, at least for like New York, I remember that that was at the tail end of or mid-May, I believe, of 2021. The word was out, okay, we're going to start opening things up. And it was in early June, like the session was booked, and then I got the notice, okay, we're going to be doing this first week of June. And um, I was getting some material sent to me, but in various forms of development, like the music itself wasn't even totally solidified. Um, but I guess by this point, having worked with the group, I guess, in years past, I was kind of acclimated to that now. So same type of thing. I would listen to, the music and just kind of, you know, try to brainstorm um, different approaches that I could take um, at a session. And but I believe New Dreamland, I think that was I learned that there that day. I don't think that I had any demos for that. Basic instruction for that track, um, in terms of an overall direction. Um, it went originally first, it was just going to be hand percussion. Um, and at that, I was thinking very minimal.
Mm,
Um, and, a go-to instrument for me might be the bongos.
mm,
It's it tends to stay out of the way, out of other instruments, um, pretty easily, just because of the nature of its sound and its register. And but I heard the track, I believe, right there in the studio, and the thing that was most noticeable right away, compositionally, was the the vocal as well as the the guitar and the bass. Everything was centered around the Latin rumba 3/2 clave.
mm,
And I heard it right away. So, of course, that then just leads me kind of down that road of maybe something Cuban,
mm,
in which case bongos. Okay, well, there we go.
yeah,
So sometimes little musical cues will trigger something for me in terms of the instrument selection and maybe also some pairings of instruments. Um, Obviously, if you are a listener of Latin music and Cuban music in particular, you'll have conga, bongo, guichero, maracas, claves, and um, you know, of course, that has a very long tradition.
mm,
Um, and of course, in those musics, you have many of those, um, in the percussion section. It's very rich. For a, American folk, contemporary folk, world music, classical type of project, it's a thing where sometimes you might not want to overburden the music
Mm.
with all of those layers of instruments, even though that they will work together. But just use your intuition and start with one instrument. In this case, it was the bongo. Um, so I went in and just that was just a single first take, first ever. You just
Right.
play,
Mm.
and I had learned the track as they were doing some scratch vocals. So um, and so I just did the bongo, and then after that, I get the knock on the door.
Right.
What,
Mm.
what else do you have there?
Oh.
Oh, okay. How about clave, right? Why not? Being that this rumba clave rhythm is so, it's truly the underpinning of the composition. So I knew right then and there exactly what I had to do. I was going to play the rumba clave.
Mm.
But there's a little twist in the meter. A lot of Porter Smith's compositions are in uh, different meters, or you know um, a mixture of meters. So this particular track had a bar of 3/4,
Mm.
which offsets the clave rhythm. So it was one of those instances where, again, I just grabbed the instrument, grabbed the claves, went into the booth, and as we're doing it, I was like, oh yeah, that's a bar 3. I will remove one of the strikes
Mm.
from the clave rhythm, and you just do it again. One single pass. It was the only time that the song had ever, been, performed, and there was the clave track.
Yeah.
And so the two parts, the conga and bongo
Fine.
and clave, those were just, a very nice marriage.
Mm.
Um, I did that, knock on the door again, you know,
What
what
else you
else you
got?
got?
Yeah.
So I was just like, well, okay, let's try guichero maybe. So I had that with me. Um, and it's interesting too, the actual tone of the instrument. So Porter sat right in front of me, and I just said, "What about something like this?" So I just played the traditional guiro pattern with the long scrape
And
and
the
then the two
shorts.
shorter scrapes. Again, knowing that at some point the rhythm is going to be offset by this bar of 3. Well, I just happened to take out the guiro and I played it, and I knew right away that it wasn't really the right sound
Mm.
for this particular, track. And it was funny too, because I looked at Porter, and he also kind of had an immediate reaction to the sound. Like it was a little too broad,
Mm.
you know, almost, on the guiro, you have all those different incisions,
Yeah.
on it. And it's almost like the scraping, going from one to the next to the next. It's,
Yeah.
really, overbearing. And he looked and he's like, no, 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 no. And I felt that too. And I said, oh, but wait a minute. I have an alternate. What about this? And it was the guichero, which is this was the synthetic version made by LP, and it's a smaller replication of a small gourd.
Mm,
Um, and so it's considerably smaller, and it also has a very fine um, notches in it.
mm.
Like they're really incredibly thin, and it's also played with, I guess, with a wire scraper as opposed to a stick,
Okay.
which would be for the guiro.
Mm,
And so it has this, I don't know, it has a very pleasing tone to it. And and I just, kind of played that type of pattern. And right away, Porter was like, yes, yes, that's it, go. And so I went right into the booth.
get in there.
The song starts, and again, same thing. I just improvised, and again, just one pass,
Oh, that's great.
you know, that was that. And so, um, uh, I finished those three instruments, and, I was like, okay, I'm more than satisfied. There's a lot. There's a lot happening just between those three voices. Um, and Then it was brought to my attention, oh, how about drum set? Would you, what do you feel about that? Okay, well, I mean, it can always it can always be added. It wasn't necessarily what I was looking to. I thought that the track was complete.
Mm,
Um, and so the decision was made then to add drum set the following morning, actually. We were on a time budget.
okay.
So, I had enough of the percussion. So, I guess we may have decided to move on to the next track. So that gave me, a little time, on the drive home to the studio. It's like, okay, what's going to work with this? And since there was already so much happening, I figured that maybe it would be good just to take a real minimal approach with the drum set. And so the following morning, we arrived. I was the first one to arrive. And they just gave me the green light. They said, we're going to be a little late, but if you can do any of the work on that track,
Mm,
So we did. It was just myself and the engineer. And so again, following suit, I was like, you know what? How about, taking a cue from another uh, genre from the Cuban tradition, the cha-cha.
oh,
So I just set up a cowbell, I believe off on my left side. This particular session was kind of a mess
mm,
because I would kind of create different setups. If it was like for drum set, I would create different setups for each of the tracks. The
mhm,
first time that I really ever did that. So I didn't really know at any given point what the setup was going to include until, that ultimate decision was made. It's like, okay, you know, I'm going to go in this direction.
mm,
And then I would just hope that I would have some of the hardware available to make that setup possible. And I was smart enough to bring a lot of extras in terms of the hardware. So, I had some clamps and, the DW dog bones and
Yeah.
everything. So, yep, created a little drum kit, and played it really simple. And literally, I think it was just, hi-hat, cowbell, and bass drum punctuations. It was there just to really support and actually be a little more understated.
Mm,
Um, where really it was the percussion that I thought should be the focus,
mm,
and just play some really subtle things. Again, there's already enough happening,
yeah.
musically, compositionally. There's two-part harmonies happening, with the voices, and, these rhythm punctuations all throughout. And so it was pretty simple, quite honestly, because it's like the music is really dictating to me exactly what to play. And in this case, it was, just punctuate that. That's all it needs. It doesn't need anything to stand out. If anything, this is more about, the blend. And so that was the overall approach with that.
Mm.
And then I think I just had an idea to, include what ultimately yielded, I think, just like one little timbale stroke, like on
Right.
the downbeat of a phrase.
Mm.
So again, that was more, I was thinking maybe just for kind of production value, maybe they could do something with that. Um, so I thought between all of that, in the percussion and drum set, that the track was finally complete. And but it was quite simple to do, and fun
Mm.
to have all these parts fit together, and you know kind of everything is has its own space. And I think that's one of the things that we look to do, to when we're supporting compositions, is every part serves a function.
Mm.
And we hope that it'll just fit just right,
Mm.
kind of like the puzzle pieces, right,
Yeah.
that are always in motion. But
Mm.
yeah, so that's a little background about that track.
Yeah, that's I love that. It's the you never hear, well, I shouldn't say you never hear it, but hearing the backstory, the fly in the wall stuff's always it's always been an interest to me. And I'm sure for you guys out there watching, it's good to hear the process, and what it entails, because I think there's a lot of players out there that haven't really burgeoned into the studio world. Most of it is, people do a lot of recording at home, but to walk into a recording studio is a whole, there's a different mindset, there's a different focus, there's a different intent that you start to feel when you walk into a studio and you get ready to do the recording. So hearing this, what you just described of like sort of making sure the moving parts can move, and then keeping the family together, so to speak, with the instrumentation, but also like you mentioned, just the appropriate parts. Where I always love to hear recordings that's why this tune stood out for me, is hearing what's on the song. You can't really think of anything else that you could have on it, where it's just you can't, like, you hear the instrumentation, the percussion, everything else that's on there, to not hear like, oh, that could have used this, it could have used that. To hear this particular tune, I couldn't think of anything else that could be on there. So what's on there is, like you mentioned, it's like, it just fits together. It's appropriate, where things can move along. It doesn't need any more than what's on there. And those are like the tunes that I enjoy the most, is that you can't imagine anything else being there than what is there. Everything that's there is appropriate.
Hmm.
So that's the thing that I guess that stood out for me too. And having you discuss what was involved with the process kind of confirms that. So, and I think for the listener of this particular song, trying to find that 3/4 measure would be a really cool thing for people to kind of find when you go to the SoundCloud page and hear the song, like spot that 3/4 part and how many times it comes up. So that'd be a good little sort of like sort of oral discovery, where you can slap on your headphones and listen for a bit. And that's the thing I enjoy about picking out these songs is that I got to use these guys and just sit and listen a little bit. And with how things move these days, it's so fast to actually sit down for a second and just listen for something, and listen to something and get lost in that whole thing was really cool. And then again, mentioning the studio session and what was occurring and the knocks on the door and the all that is just fantastic. Really appreciated that, you sharing that with everybody. I think it's something that you know I always am a fan of that. I love that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to think what else I can talk about with you with these tracks. So it was good to hear that the idea of preparation and you know what goes into that, and it varies depending on the project. So it's really cool to kind of hear what you did, and going into it all. Because sometimes we have the luxury of sitting down and charting out, what's going to occur, and we don't always get those opportunities to do that, to sit and listen and then make a chart. And I'm sure there'll be songs that we could talk about in maybe later episodes, having you back on, that we can talk about those things. Hey, I did a chart. This particular session was a month and a half away. I had some scratch tracks to work with. I made charts, and then we can maybe perhaps hear, okay, well, the charts took us so far, or they were there, but then they wanted something different because a month and a half went by. They heard new ideas, like you mentioned on these songs, playing, in front of the guitarist and say, okay, all right, that's perfect. That's great. That not so much. It kind of is too stark. It's too harsh. So it was great to hear all these things you discussed, because I think it's again, like I always fall into fly on the wall, like what was going on that day and what did you guys do, and because you don't really, you just hear the song, you hear the end product, you don't get to hear the processes of what went into it, and what the artist was thinking of, or maybe not. So maybe in later episodes too, we may feature a song that the artist didn't really know particularly what they wanted. They just knew how you approach things and how you play, and being perfect for the song, excuse me, being perfect to play the tune. And they know exactly what you can offer. And then you just have the free reign to go about doing that. So that could be something for maybe a later episode. So,
Sure, sure.
so yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's really something that, hearing these different levels of the approach to do the project, the preparation that was involved, and then of course the choice of the instrumentation. It's really, those are the main things I want to kind of talk with you about today, and I'm glad we had this discussion. Anything else you want to share as we perhaps close, or
Um, no.
nothing? Well, you shared
Unless,
enough, and all of it has been super valuable. And again, we talk about these things off camera quite a bit, in terms of like what's coming up, and and then the new items you get in lieu of, when this project comes up, I want to have this sound. So that's the one thing that stood out for me on this, is the idea that choosing the appropriate instruments and having them, if they're used or not. It's like that idea where it's preparation, but it's also the instrumentation, like thinking, oh, this could, this might actually work. I want to have that sound with me, and I don't want to miss out on, oh, if I only had this, it would have been great for this track. So that's something that we talk about a lot, leading up to just deciding to do this podcast, is that's like a running feature that I always enjoy, because, and being that I started with drums. I'm not a drummer per se. I don't do a lot of sessions, but my first love is the drums. So hearing you discuss, different instruments kind of makes me want to, I mean, I have my electronic kit behind me. So I don't have my acoustic kit. I had to get rid of it, blah, blah, blah. But hearing like the items that you're looking to get, and that not me not even knowing like the extent. I mean, the family of hand percussion is huge. and then hearing
Hmm.
about what you want to pick up to have in lieu of a future recording project is always great to hear that stuff. So the fact you share these instruments, like some I don't even know as well. So, and now again, I'll be including those both in the description below and in some photos of each of these items too, so you guys get to see what these things look like. So if you want to utilize that instrumentation for what you're playing, whether it's a studio thing or just for your own enjoyment, or for a gig, you get to see where these things reside, so you can actually purchase these instruments, which I think is something that's important too, to have that ability to, if you're a drum set player and you want to go into hand percussion, having these items, because I think that's not really a common thing. Like, guichero, and how often do you hear about it in just normal conversation with drummers? You don't really hear it as much, except in the world musics. In that community, you get to hear about these different instruments. So I think for the regular person, um, to explore these items is a great way to break out of a rut, first off. And I covered this on episode 1 with Jim Benner, that it kind of unlocks your potential in terms of not being in a rut. And with drumming and percussion, so much to get into. It's kind of dizzying, actually. So that makes it more exciting too, because when you go into, like you mentioned, you're doing these sessions, hearing these different tonal characteristics of the instruments really makes it a little bit easier to kind of, okay, now I'm going to use this particular item. It may work, it may not work, and that helps you with your preparation of where you want to enter with an idea, where you want to exit with an idea. So I think all the stuff you mentioned, Chris, on this episode is, I think, hopefully, no pun intended, instrumental into what you can do as a player, and the possibilities that you have, whether you're recording in a studio, or you're at home in your own studio. All these things play in, very well. So I think that was, like, the big takeaway for me is that part of um, the episode. What was involved, what was the thing that was going to serve the tune at the moment, whether it was pre-planning or on the day. So I think that was really informative that you shared all that.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you. So I guess, no pun intended again, on that note, we probably could call this episode a day. And in terms of, like, where people could find you apart from SoundCloud, any items you want to share in terms of where people can find you for hearing what you do, and perhaps reaching out to you maybe for drum lessons, if you offer drum lessons online or in person, or how could they
uh,
follow that?
well, I guess maybe the simplest thing would be Linktree. It
Oh,
has all the social media links, so that's Linktree / the Music Pilgrim, which is my, I guess, handle for all social media platforms that I'm on. So yeah, people can get in touch that way, and yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions and um, you know, guide people along.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's good too. Very helpful for people who want to use you for a recording session, like I mentioned, taking lessons. I mean, it runs the gamut in terms of how people can interact. So that's really good. So I'll include that, of course, below, like everything else I mentioned. It'll all
Mhm.
be in the description below this video. So, but yes, I want to thank you again for being on this podcast, the second one, and amazing episode. And if you like this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe. In the future, this podcast will probably be in audio format and, of course, video as you're seeing it. So stay tuned for those details in the future. And if you'd like to be on an episode, feel free to leave a comment below, and we'll arrange a day and a time to get you on, and we'll call it a day. So thank you again, Chris Howard, for
Yeah,
being on episode 2. Very, very fortunate that you're here, and thank you
and
again.
thank you, and good luck with the podcast.
Yeah, so good luck to you with all the influx of folks reaching out to you, and communicating and asking questions. So thank you again, and we will call it. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.